Is Blade Runner 2049 one of the best science fiction movies of recent years? That's a debatable question. Let me tell you what I like about this movie, and if you watch it, whether you hate it or love it or are indifferent to it, if you're a video maker, an artist, or creator of anything, you can get a lot out of this movie, which I think is commendable. Coming up next. Blade Runner 2049 came out in the year 2017 and has been a popular choice, particularly with younger moviegoers, movie viewers, because, well, for one reason, they love Denis Villeneuve's direction, his artwork, and so on. And I can see why they really like this movie. I'm really talking about Gen Z sorts of people born, after the year 2000 or so, or maybe a little bit later. I, though, was born, I'm a Gen X person, and I remember the original Blade Runner, not when it came out in the movie theater, but when it came out in home video release and all the different versions of it. So I was well familiar with not just Blade Runner, but a couple of different versions of it when I went into Blade Runner 2049. I also have a lot of science fiction background. I teach a class, and I know a lot about science fiction, period. So I bring my own biases to bear when I watch this film. And truthfully, when it came out, I, in writing, criticized it negatively for a lot of things that it did. I thought it repeated the original movie way too much, and a number of other things which I'll leave to the end of this video. But I want to talk about what I like about this movie to help you understand, I think, what's good about a movie that I actually feel a little indifferent towards in some respects. Now, there are going to be spoilers here and no plot review, so just know that you may gain something from this video if you have not watched the movie, but definitely it will have helped to have watched the movie. There are two things you will get from any Villeneuve movie, and those are always, they're consistent. He is absolutely fantastic at cinematography and sound design. Now, I'm sure he works with a number of great people on set, so full credit to them for all the great work they've done. But of course, he is, representative and responsible ultimately as the director for this. So I give him credit for the vision, the final vision of this film, which looks and sounds absolutely fantastic, as does Dune, as does Arrival. Now, the film is both science fiction, but it's sort of a crime detective story, as the original material was. Philip K. Dick's Do Androids Dream of Electric Sheep, which Blade Runner is based on that novel, and to some extent, Blade Runner 2049 is based on the novel. One thing I really like about this movie, I think it gets Philip K. Dick's vision a little bit better, in fact, a lot better than Blade Runner. Now, Philip K. Dick, in a few months before he died, watched Blade Runner and said it was great representation of his vision, but I really think 2049 is better. One, it's post-apocalyptic of a sort. It's foggy, it's smoggy, or whatever, and there's been nuclear fallout in certain places. One place, Las Vegas, has been nuked to death. Nobody lives there. Well, one person lives there. And it has this absolutely wonderful sort of Fallout New Vegas, the video game, look to it. As well, things that are real are scarce. The character is told at one point that the wood that he has is worth a lot of money. They're farming bugs in this movie. There doesn't seem to be any real meat or any real food, and on and on and on. So this film gets the ideas of Philip K. Dick's post-apocalyptic world down pretty well. But let's go back to cinematography. I want to talk about the inspirations here. I see Tarkovsky, the great Russian director, in his film The Sacrifice, immediately when I watch this movie. The tree, the thing buried under the tree, the interiors of the rooms and the spaces are sparse, and this is a Tarkovsky-like movie about sacrifice. And Tarkovsky's movie, The Sacrifice, is about World War III and its possible aftermaths. That's kind of sort of the idea here, at least the post-apocalyptic genre in general, and so Tarkovsky is a good one to reference. Another good reference here are the Fallout video games, and you get a number of possibilities here. One, the main character, Kay, is going to different places as a single individual, and you have a lot of episodic stuff with Kay going to this place, that place, and the other place, and it feels a little bit video game-ish with a number of shots showing Kay as a third-person perspective in the foreground, and you look over his shoulder at the world around him or beyond him, and looks a lot like video games, period, plus the settings. I mean, the junkyard that is San Diego with child labor, the Las Vegas setting with obviously the casinos. This is all in part in Fallout, or has shades of the various Fallout games. And then the other thing happening here is noir. A lot of detective noir and a lot of shots that give off a noirish vibe of a detective here, Kay, hunting down androids, or in the main plot at least, trying to find something that he's looking for, and the problem of memory, which comes up in all kinds of detective fiction. Is my memory real or not? Do I have a real consciousness or not? And Kay is having a, sort of an existential crisis as the android detective police officer. And so this movie, uses noir techniques, especially the low lit interiors all over the place. A shot that resonates, comes up all the time in this movie, is Kay as a shadow. He's a shadow of himself. He's a shadow of human beings. He's the sort of Pinocchio figure who may want to be human or may want to discover more about himself. And we see maybe 20 to 30 times Kay as a shadow. Another thing we see a lot is Kay's reflection, or a reflection of the world around him. He's looking into mirrors, into glass, and we see him reflected as a faint, evanescent image, or the world around him as such. And I think one thing the movie is referencing here is Alice in Wonderland, specifically the sequel, Through the Looking Glass, which comes up in all kinds of science fiction as this weird, trippy story about a girl going into the opposite world, the mirror world that she's in, and what that inversion would mean.
Treasure Island? He reads. That's good.
This brings me to another thing I like about this movie, which that it is highly literary, or it tries to be, especially with its references. Not only do we have Alice in Wonderland, but we have Treasure Island directly quoted in this movie, and the visit to the Hermit, who is, spoiler, Harrison Ford here, the Tom Gunn kind of figure, and Kay being, the main character in Treasure Island, with the Las Vegas area being the island itself, perhaps.
Would you read to me? It'll make you feel better.
You hate that book.
I don't want to read either.
Or, actually, they show the book Pale Fire by Nabokov. And in the movie, you see that book especially. It's prominently featured. Maybe hoping that the audience will read the book. I love that book. It's one of the greatest of the 20th century. The literariness doesn't stop there. There's so much science fiction fare in this film, including both movies and books. Specifically, like for movies, the movie Her, there's a scene where the android and his hologram housewife orders up a sort of prostitute or other female surrogate figure to come in and, to have a physical relationship with the android. That's straight out of the movie Her, which was released 3 or 4 years before this movie. The movie also uses biblical themes throughout. It's using both the baby Jesus Herod stuff with the Moses and Egyptian stuff. And if you don't know this stories, read the Bible to figure them out. But basically, the Jared Leto figure of the CEO of the Tyrell Corporation is kind of a pharaoh. And the imagery surrounding that sort of central location is Masonic on the one hand with the eyeball and the pyramid stuff, the glowing yellow or watery yellow stuff going on with the giant cavernous pyramid-like interiors or sparse interiors. Plus, he's talking about the kingdom of heaven. He wants to make laborers or slaves. He wants more androids, which is why he wants to hunt down the replicant who's been born so he can, sire more, have more replicants, bear his children to be slaves. And so here's a Moses figure, sort of, in Kay, liberating, or the possibility at least of him liberating all these slaves by finding the replicant or hiding the replicant. Now, there's baby Jesus stuff here because in the New Testament, baby Jesus, Herod goes after the baby Jesus and tries to kill him. And then here you have a similar thing, it's not about killing, it's about finding the replicant. And so there's savior motifs, messianic motifs, Exodus, liberating the slaves motifs in this movie, all over the place, with Kay as a central character who doesn't know that he wants to get involved in this, but does. And that's where the literariness continues. Kay comes straight out of Franz Kafka's work. Joseph K. is in the story The Castle, or The Trial. They're kind of both here in this movie, with Kay in his existential crisis, not being sure what he is, what his society is, what he's up against, what his memory is, whether he's a real person or not, whether he's the replicant sired by the, the Harrison Ford, Rachel Young characters. And Joseph Ka is coming, I think, out of The Trial. And so there's a trial-likeness to this movie. If you go back and watch the Orson Welles movie, The Trial, I think it's in here a little bit. And so this movie has a rich tapestry of allusions to it that when I watch, I go, oh, wow, that's there, and that's there. I really appreciate that about Villeneuve because, a lot of science fiction directors aren't readers. Even a lot of directors, period, aren't readers, and they don't sort of sync up with or tie into literary traditions at all. They may tie into movie traditions, but not necessarily literary traditions. Well, Villeneuve is doing that here. Villeneuve learned from George Lucas, and specifically Empire Strikes Back, to vary your locations, and you have wonder after wonder after wonder involved. With Empire Strikes Back, we go to 4 or 5 different, wildly different settings, from ice to a swamp to a cloud city. Well, this movie does very similar things. You have snowy parts, you have sort of fiery red Las Vegas parts, you have dark parts and interiors, you have the rain sequences, and there's a simulated greenhouse in here at one point. It just goes on. There must be 6 or 7 wildly different looking locations, which makes the movie have a lot of variety. I think it's very pleasing to the eye and satisfies us with Villeneuve because he's able to show off so often in this movie. Wonderful looking shots. In fact, pretty much every single shot looks spectacular, as that every frame of painting line has it, where every frame in this movie is kind of a painting. All in all, I like this movie's look, I like its sound, I like its ambition, and I like its literariness, and I wish that more movies were like this. And on second viewing, I appreciated this movie a little bit better, even though it's not my favorite, and even though I don't think it's as good as most other people think. What do you think about this video? What do you think about this movie? Let us know in the comments. Be kind. Thank you so much. Subscribe to this channel for more great content. Have a great day. Now, very briefly, and you can skip over this if you want, here are some of my negative criticisms of this film. Please remember, this is just my opinion. It's a movie opinion. This is for fun and for learning. I think this movie is too much a replication of Blade Runner. I kind of understand that it itself wants to be a replicant of the first Blade Runner and sort of punning on its own content. That there are replicants here that look like humans. This movie looks like the original Blade Runner. Maybe that's the Pale Fire twist, though. In Pale Fire, you have a poem, and then the commenter on the poem takes a wildly different interpretation with the poem. But I don't find this movie actually did that. It's too much of the same material. And this is an era where you get rehashes, retro rehashes of all kinds of 1980s material. I note that when this movie came out, the Stephen King thing about the clown, Flatliners, you had Ghostbusters coming out, and Stranger Things, which is kind of an E.T. Sort of reboot with a number of other things going on in it, but there's a lot of retro stuff at this time. But I feel like this movie is too much repeating Blade Runner, from the wooden horses, Edward James Olmos, Harrison Ford, Rachel Young, Tears in the Rain, bodies going through plaster walls, and on and on and on. There must be 100 things from this movie that are in the original Blade Runner. The question is why? Why couldn't it be different? I don't understand that necessarily, although maybe there are good arguments for it out there. I also don't feel like the plot actually went anywhere, and this movie takes a long time, 160 minutes, to go over something that is, one thing, pretty complicated, the backstory, but also pretty oversimplified, which is a hunt for one person. And, this movie has gigantic science fictional ideas that are all over Golden Age science fiction and 60s to 70s science fiction. Just read Philip K. Dick and read, his top 10, top 15 novels. And this movie is far less complex in terms of its ideas about simulations, whether androids are really real, whether our memories are really constructed, and how society, creates our memories for us, sort of, the Tyrell Corporation and laborers, all those kinds of things, the Pinocchio stuff with the holograms and the androids. If you read Philip K. Dick, read Gene Wolfe, a number of great science fiction authors, they're far more complex about these topics, which are very, very rich to mine, for one hand, for stories, but there's a lot of philosophy involved here, and I feel like this movie falls somewhat short of its ambitions, especially by the end. That makes me wonder if there's going to be a sequel to this movie, if there's going to be a liberation of the slaves, and sort of this grand vision of the androids rising up and rebelling. That would be kind of a cool movie, but I don't know if it's in the works or not. Yet this movie does feel like a bit of a setup for a sequel. As well, to be honest, I would just rather play the Fallout games again, and maybe that's just me, but I had a grander time with the Fallout games, which are like this movie and predate this movie, than with this movie itself. So as much as I like to look and listen to this movie, video games, and the thing about movies today is movies have to compete with video games and have to be more fun, more attractive. Some of them do, at least, and certainly the science fictional ones, because there are a lot of damn good video games out there that are a lot of fun to play, take up a lot of time, and are very, very thoughtful. So those are my opinions on Blade Runner 2049, but I tell you, if you're an artist or video maker, this movie could easily inspire you. I can see why a number of people really love it.